Applying Goffman to the Volkswagen Diesel Crisis of 2015 by Carrie Graves, Com 613, Queen's University of Charlotte, 2018. Introduction. Today I am getting a new car. It's a Volkswagen, a 2017 Tiguan, a model that in its roomier 2018 version is designed to attract American customers. Many of us, about the age of 35 or more, are likely to have fond memories of trusted Volkswagen in our families or as our first cars. If you didn't have a VW van, maybe you had a Beetle. I did. I was 5 years old and can still remember the trunk being in the front of the car where the engine usually is. I remember being picked up from kindergarten in the car that day we got our first cat, Flower, who was along for the ride. Kind of funny that the return of the Beetle in the 2000s included a flower vase. Volkswagen is a company that aspires to attract the American market. Being the #1 selling car in Europe, they would like the same status in the United States. So much so that the company didn't stop at taking shortcuts and lying to attempt to gain that control. Using the concepts of Erving Goffman's theory of impression analysis through his dramaturgic metaphor, we will look at ways Volkswagen has used impression analysis pre- and post-crisis in the diesel scandal of 2015. This presentation will examine the strategic communication error in Volkswagen's lack of pre-crisis communication preparation and the effects it had on the post-crisis response. Presentation of the case. When loyal VW customers learned in 2015 that Volkswagen had intentionally cheated on emissions testing through a software trick in order to sell more of their supposedly clean diesel vehicles in America, they were outraged. Volkswagen had for years crafted a successful impression management that had built lifelong customer loyalty. They produced signature family vehicles for decades, especially in the forms of their VW buses and Beetles. Icons of the hippie era, these automobiles represented freedom and individuality in a way that appealed to the changing American cultural ethos of the 60s and 70s. When in 2015 it was discovered that Volkswagen, who had run on a strategic communication strategy of clean energy, VW attempted denial, saying that the trick software was not illegal, at least in Europe. When it was made clear that this too was a deception, VW finally took responsibility for its actions and began to make reparations. Analysis of the case. To analyze this case, we need to look at the four concepts of Goffman's impression analysis through the lens of the four concepts of his dramaturgic metaphor. All the world's a stage, right? First, impression management. VW pre-crisis had been successful front stage in crafting an impression, their cars representing reliability, security, stability, and freedom for the American lifestyle. VW was so successful at its front stage presentation that it failed to look at backstage performing and was either unaware or turned a blind eye to elements that would, in 2015, lead to intrigue and scandal. 2. Framing. Faced with such an extreme public relations crisis, VW had to come up with a new way to frame its message. The initial framing of VW diesels as being clean cars was simply untrue. In order to reframe, VW had to, post-crisis, own its responsibility and/or negligence in letting this scandal take place. We'll talk about how they got back to their message of cars fitting the American lifestyle shortly. 3. Footing. Reframing was not simple because of the company's footing. The overlapping roles of communicator, according to Goffman, of author, animator, and principal, were inconsistent. The chief of the company, the principal, Martin Winterkorn, resigned, claiming that the scandal was the result of a few people. Later, Michael Horn, the author, the president and chief executive of Volkswagen Group of America, admitted the company's complete failure in this scandal. One might consider the animators of the company to be the dealership owners and what today we would call brand ambassadors, loyal customers, neither of which could support what VW had done. The unevenness of the three legs of this stool did not make for steady footing. 4. Face. During the scandal revelations and negotiations, VW did its best to save public face. Company officials and communicators seemed to be on board when it came time to make a multi-billion-dollar decision of loss to recall and replace or repair the hundreds of thousands of rigged diesel vehicles. This solution did not please all loyal customers, but stood as reparation for some. Overall sales went up. VW had to abandon its model of clean diesel, which didn't appeal to Americans as much as to Europeans anyway, despite our time of concern about climate change. Volkswagen attempted to save face by asserting goodwill by going back to its public face of reliability and stability to suit the American lifestyle, including finding the right recipe for a compact SUV, the Tiguan. Jessica Caldwell, an analyst at Edmunds.com, might posit that this goodwill works. She believes that Americans tend to forgive car makers who have let them down. They may try another brand for a while, but like to come back to an old trusted favorite. Henrik J. Wobken, president and chief executive of Volkswagen Group of America, told reporters last November that the company was ready to target the heart of the SUV market. This country always loves the comeback story, right? Mr. Wobken said. That's what American people love, and they love to give people a second chance, he said. Well, you're welcome, Mr. Wobken. With your extended warranties and good lease deal on the Tiguan, you are rescuing me from a predicament you got me into in the first place. I had a lemon Jetta wagon in 2002, but bought my van used in 2014 because it was perfect for my family, and thinking VW's mechanics had improved. They had. But reaching the breaking point of paying for repairs on a used car, I found out from a buyer at CarMax that the VW PR crisis was affecting the cost of my vehicle. I was definitely ready to move on. But we are headed out to see Bess, my 2010 Volkswagen Routan. Here she is. My boys and I had a goodbye ritual for her before the kids left for school. She's been a great car. We've loved the adventures we've had in her. Just look at all this room. Leather seats, DVD players, stereo, and heated seats. We have loved this car. And now we have to give her up. But you got me. You've saved face by helping me get into one of your new cars, one of your SUVs, hoping to make me a fan. I really hope it works out. Strategies for the future. Because diesel was such an important factor for VW in Europe, where the company held more than 25% of the market share in 2015, VW was concerned about what the American scandal would do to its reputation in Europe. Strategies for communication in the future might include a more personal and detailed analysis of the characteristics of VW that work in different markets. It would serve the company well to pay much closer attention to the backstage performing of its employees and executives. There they might discover flaws that would lead to loss of footing and the destruction of public face. An internal framing of communication could bring backstage performers together as a team devoted to the company, a team that would either not betray the company out of greed or would spot intrigue and trust management enough to report it. Conclusion. In 2015, Volkswagen saw the ramifications of its nearly fatal errors in strategic communication. By failing to coordinate their communication efforts as seen through the lens of Goffman's impression analysis, negative backstage performing was brought front and center, becoming the face of the company. Not standing on steady footing, the principal, author, and animators of the company were not on the same page as to message strategy. Although sales of VW went up in the U.S. after the company admitted its wrongs, they and we still suffer the consequences. My CarMax appraisal came in shockingly low, 75% lower than the number on which my car taxes are based. The buyer explained that bad PR for VW is affecting CarMax's buying decisions. The fact that my auto advisor, who knows the business inside and out, could only get me out of a tricky situation by putting me in another VW tells me that VW is still on the front lines of image repair and impression management. References for this presentation can be found in the blog post in which it is contained.